Hemshech Chaim Beis, Volume 1, we're concluding the Discourse 42. We're up to page 342. Shin Mem Beis, which is the end of the Maimer Dvorim, Ayin Gimel, which we shall soon, we're a little ahead of the centennial. So, this Maimer, so we are right now actually technically Koirach Ayin Gimel this week. Tafshin Ayin Gimel, Tafresh Ayin Gimel, 1912, 1913, 2013. So, though this is not so-called timely, but it's the same way timely, I just want to say a few words about just where we are. Being that this is like a momentous days for Chabad, and I guess for the entire world in a way, between Chav Ches Sivan and Gimel Tammuz. Chav Ches Sivan would be 72 years since the Rebbe came to America, and Chav Gimel Tammuz is however you want to define that. Gimel Tammuz. And to me this is obviously always sits with me basically 24/7. Besides the fact that I had so many years that I worked directly for the Rebbe writing, reminding the talks, so that was like my whole life was shaped by that. But more importantly maybe is that the Rebbe left us with a unfinished business, an unfinished mission. And not in any, he didn't allude to it, but spoke about it very directly, otherwise known as Mashiach. And that is that we have to do something about it. So it troubles me to no end that it's 19 years, it's going to be 19 years in 2 days, of when that fateful day, Gimel Tammuz. Everybody here is old enough to remember. And 21 years since the Rebbe had the stroke, and 23 years since Chav Ches Nisan. I'm not going to give you all the anniversaries, but the point is, I cannot begin learning without at least making a protest, a macha, as they say. Not to you, I'm saying it to the world, since this is going to be broadcast soon to 7 billion people, potentially. Is that how could we really, especially someone calls themselves a chassid, not be at least troubled or frustrated that there's no real movement or change? Well, more importantly, what are we doing about it? So I'm not here to put anybody in a guilt trip, but it felt a little uncomfortable to start learning Ayin Beis without making that statement, because the whole point of Ayin Beis is not just to satisfy our own intellects and emotions and spiritual aspirations, but to give us tools and empowerment and methods to do whatever we can to communicate Ruchnius and Elokus to anyone we meet. So obviously we don't measure things in Judaism. Even one act can tip the scale. Though obviously you can have global plans, but I don't underestimate the power that each of us learning a piece of Ayin Beis is learning a piece of Teirasha Shel Mashiach. The Rebbe made it very clear that Ayin Beis is like the last shlav, the last step in Yefutz Meinesecha Chutza, when he published it 26 years ago, Amud Zayin, when the first time published. I've told the story a number of times here, the whole resistance and the Rebbe's sakana involved. The Rebbe felt it was dangerous, and did it in 36. Amud Zayin is 36. 36 years ago. So it was 75 years from actually when Ayin Beis was said, the Rebbe, and the way the Rebbe did it was in a very anonymous way, no names and all that. So clearly Ayin Beis carries the whole weight of Chabad in it, and for us it means tools. It means ability, number one, to make Elokus, godliness, more, let's call it palatable to us, and in effect causing us to be more refined, to be able to express and communicate this to others. So I just want to make that statement. How we translate it on a Gimel Tammuz and motivate us to do something on a larger scale, that I leave it, everyone's going to have to figure that out. I'm trying to do my part, but I wanted to just make that statement as we begin learning. I hope it's niskabel, it's just received well, and with the intention that it was sent. Okay. With that said, where we are in the Hemshech is as follows. The Hemshech, the more you learn it, the more I learn it, at least I can say, or the more we learn it, the more it's obvious that it is exactly that. It's a blueprint for global change. Today the word interface is big, but the Rebbe Rashab, interface is the operative word in the whole Hemshech, Mamutza in Hebrew. Mamutza means interface. It can be you can even call it portal, intermediary between two realities: the material existence as we know it, and the divine reality, a higher reality. And the truth is, even that statement is very relative. And I'm sure everyone here defines material reality differently, and also divine reality differently. But Ayin Beis is written for everyone, and basically everyone has to fit it into where they're at. So wherever you are, the point of Ayin Beis is to lift you up to a more refined, a more subtle, a less self-absorbed reality, and not in a way that forces it upon us, like just to do it due to fear or due to just Kabbalah sale. It explains it. It takes us on a journey into understanding the more sublime dimensions of existence, to be able to understand it more sublime, to get us as close as possible to the top, which is the source of it all. And God, in His infinite compassion, created stepping stones for us, like a good teacher. That doesn't require a jump that's beyond us. Each of us can find these ideas within our lives, and as such, then elevate and grow. And that's the key. So, frankly, if you take any of this seriously, you should be able to look at each day of your life and say, I've grown in Ruchnius so and so. I've grown in my understanding, I've grown in my sensitivity to others, I've grown in my commitment, mitzvahs, hidur, however you translate it. But Chassidus is not just action. Obviously everything is action oriented, but it's really driven by, when you are more refined, everything around you becomes more refined. Simple as that. If you look at things in a more edler way, in a more subtle, sensitive way, then everything changes. So obviously it comes down to actions and so on, but it comes down to actions that are saturated with Elokus, which really, you can say, is mini Mashiach. When the Moreh Ne'im writes that every one of us has a nitzutz, a spark of Mashiach within us, it's saying that within us we have that utopian reality. It's not a distant reality somewhere on a mountain. It's inside of you. It's how you were created. It's embedded in your DNA, so to speak, in your psyche. And all the elamas that we talk about, right now we're talking about Adam Kadmon, which I'll soon elaborate upon. All these realities are within you. And climbing to that so-called utopian state is called total fusion. Fusion between matter and spirit, between matter and energy, is the objective. Chassidus is the language of this bridge. So the language, how do you get from here to there? It's one thing you can dream about a perfect world, a world of unity, of fusion, of seamlessness. It's another actually having language that helps you go, okay, I'm here. How do I get from point A to point B to point C and so on? And the exciting part is that the Rebbe's told us and the Rebbeim have told us that we're at the end of the process. That means thousands of years of Mesiras Nefesh and dedication and self-sacrifice and all that has helped break the crassness of the universe and allowed for this flow, which is technically why the Zohar says that in the year Tov Kuf would begin the explosion of both higher knowledge and lower knowledge. It wasn't just a miracle. It was because the world was refined enough to have less resistance. Once material world is broken enough, it can become a conductor of spiritual realities. We call it technology. But that's what it comes down to. It's a Gashmistic world that once upon a time you would just think of it as a impediment to movement, time and space. Everything was separated by very brute time and space. And through science, we've learned to bridge it. We understand that through science is because really, Elokus, Ruchnius, has finally penetrated. So what Avraham Avinu began thousands of years ago finally is so-called beginning to erupt in a way that everybody can identify, both politically as in freedoms and rights, as well as scientifically and technologically, and the pace is just accelerating. With anything seems to be possible. So to bring it back to Ayin Beis, so where are we in this whole interface discussion? The Rebbe Rashab, in a very meticulous way, is building the blocks, or so-called identifying the switches. The switches at each juncture. And where we are now, after elaborating at length on the whole structure of spirit and matter, what we call Eris and Kelim, of basically the two types of energy that exists. So there's the material world as we know it, and within it there's two types of energy. One is we call it finite, immanent energy, the one that we can relate to, that manifests in existence commensurate to existence. That would be the forces of energy within nature. And our human body, it's our faculties. Our faculties are structured like a mirror image of the whole bigger reality. We're Eris and Kelim, called Er Pnimi, which is already a great gift. Means you can find in your Kelim, you can find already a connection to an Er. So, though a physical eye we relate to more, but our physical eye we know has vision in it. And vision is a little more ethereal, ruchnius, but it gives you a tool to say, okay, here's a Gashmiz thing you can explain to anyone. That there's an eye without a life force within it. God forbid, an eye of a corpse. And there's an eye, physical eye, and the same thing ears and other faculties with energy within it. That's Mamala Kalam. And then there's a second energy that is even more difficult I would say less eminent, or we call it transcendent energy. And this in the human being is the Ratzon. In the spheres, 10 spheres would be the Pnimi, Kesser would be the transcendent. In the human being, Keiches Pnimim would be Mamal Kalam and Pnimi, and Ratzon. Desire. Desire is also a force in life. But desires you can't really point to. You could say, my eyes, yes, I have vision in my eyes, I have hearing in my ears, I have intelligence in my brain, I have emotions in my heart. Ratzon is a non-localized reality, which gives us a taste of something more transcendent, the key, the makif. And as we discussed, they both serve functions. One serves a function to something that we can relate to. The transcendent brings bittul into existence. Because though the pnimi is definitely also is a recognition of something that is more than ourselves, but it's on our terms. So it can't really create the bittul that's necessary. The Seviv Kalam, the transcendent, creates the bittul. That's a big part of where we began to discuss. To elaborate on this even further, Rabbi Rashab went into a whole discussion between Ovis and Matan Torah. The difference between Ovis and Matan Torah. The Ovis' main job was to realign universe with its Pnimi, to get the pipes back in order that were corrupted through 7 generations, starting from the eating of the tree of knowledge. And Matan Torah is meant to bring in a whole new form of energy, a save of kalam and energy, a new level of bittul, a new level of experience. So that was addressed at length, and then concluding that, started speaking about Torah, which is where we are essentially at in broad sense of the terms. To start speaking about Torah, the Rebbe Rashab went into the whole thing that Torah is a mutz itself. Torah is also an interface. And like it says, God looked into the Torah and created the world. That's your interface. The Torah. There's Kutshabrichu, that's beyond. There's Alma, the world. It's not just a jump from the creator to the creation. He gave us a blueprint. He uses a blueprint. He wrote a blueprint where he manifested his plan and then gave it to us. So we have right now this blueprint. Now, what is this level of blueprint in Ruchnius? So first he begins on a lower level that it's Atzilus. That's Atzilus. Long discussion how Atzilus is the interface. Without Atzilus we wouldn't know about God, or couldn't feel godliness in this world. We'd be think of it like mineral, vegetable, or animals. We'd function, we'd do what the Creator wants us to do, but we'd have no access. Atzilus creates access. Because Atzilus is a manifestation of divine energy in terms that we can relate to. Divine wisdom, divine midas. So we say, Mahu Chanun, Afata Chanun, just like He's compassionate, so should you be compassionate. Just like God's Torah has wisdom in it. It's God's wisdom. You can understand that wisdom. That's Atzilus. Atzilus is basically the divine as it manifests in the structure of what we call Adam Elyon. Atzilus. And he goes to Arichas as Eris and Kalim. The Eris and Atzilus represent the divine aspect. The Kalim represent more the structure aspect. Chachmilah, Chachmatata. Then he moved on to say that the truth is really Istaka Baraisa Baralma. Torah is really comes from Chachma of Ak. Atzilus on a lower level, but even in its root, it's Chachma of Adam Kadman. And hence began a long discussion on Adam Kadman. Just to give you a reference, this discussion begins in Kuf Samach Dalet, 164, and we're now in 169. So around 5 chapters ago. Okay, and he's now tying together where we are all the details that he began in that up to 164. Briefly, what did he say about Adam Kadman? He said like this: Adam Kadman, we have to understand what is the interface of Adam Kadman. Clearly, plays a different role than other parts of the other switches that in the pipeline. So, what is Adam Kadman? So, he cites that Adam Kadman is that what it says in the Gemara Rosh Hashanah, Tzefa Mabit, that God gazed and looked, and saw everything b'skira achas, one glimpse, one picture, one snapshot. So Ak is that basically Adam Kadman means primordial man, but it refers to a state that is kloli, encompasses the whole picture. And he says several times, everything that would exist in time and space, from the beginning till the end, is all in Ak. However, in Ak, it's not in a form of mitzias. It's not like in a box that you open it up and there everything is there. It's in a very subtle state. The example I was been using is blueprint, because actually that's the Torah. It's a blueprint. So when you look at a blueprint, compare that to the structure that you build the blueprint based on the blueprint. So there's a similarity and there's a very big difference. The similarity is that there's nothing in the structure that's not in the blueprint. The difference is the blueprint is not a building. It's just a sketch. So spiritually, think of the blueprint as something that it doesn't have any, it's called mitzias ma. And that's why he made emphasis, everything there, number one, is equal. So in Ak, Atzilus, and Asiyah Shavim. Because in the blueprint, there's no difference. The living room, the dining room, they're all pieces of the same thing. You can't see and say, oh, this is a living room, or this is the inner chamber. Someone who reads the blueprint properly knows it's going to be that. But technically, when you looking at the blueprint, all you see is a sketch. Everything is there. And everything is equal, hashva. As opposed to other worlds, like for example, Akudim or Atzilus, they are part of the process to the next world, but no one calls them the overall encompassing. You don't say Atzilus is the klal of Bria Tzir Nasiya. It's the first step in Bria Tzir Nasiya, but Bria is not Atzilus. Whereas Ak is beyond them all, it's a blueprint for them all. He explained that's why it's called. Yeah.
After Tzimtzum?
Yeah, after Tzimtzum. I'm going to discuss that in a moment. Then he continues to explain that Ak, that's why Ak is called Adam. Kadman, it's the only world that's called Adam. Atzilus you don't call Adam. Even though there is a Adam, so-called Adam Elyon there, it is the structure of Adam, but the name Adam. So he says, because Adam is the name that encompasses everything. And he gives there's a whole chapter on discussing how the human being encompasses all parts of existence. We have Daimim Tzemei Medaber. We're made up of many different personalities and moods, whereas different parts of the creation have their mood and personality, one or two so-called features. We're an all-encompassing entity. Now the question is, how does this play into the issue of interface? So there's a whole chapter, a very fundamental chapter we learned as well, that discusses, I'm referring now to chapter, I believe it is Kuf Samachay. No, earlier. Kuf Samach Dalet. The first one, 164. The discussion is, what is Ak's role? On one hand, we call it Adam de Bria. It's a Bria, a macrocosm. It's the first world that comes after the Tzimtzum. So just to give you the picture, the Tzimtzum is one big black hole, comes the Kav, creates a big circle. Everything will be created in that circle. That circle is Ak. That's how the image looks. And then Ak itself is made up of 10 circles, and then slowly, like concentric circles working their way inward. So both circles and a line, existence begins to emerge. That's the imagery of it. So the question he asks is, Adam the Bria, so what kind of memutza is it? Bria, compared to Ein Sof, is just like Asiyah. Even more so. It says the distance from Asiyah, our Asiyah, to Ak, is compared to the distance, however distant it is, the Ak is even more distant from Ein Sof. So what kind of memutza is it? So here he explains, Ak is a memutza, a different sort of a memutza. The memutza between Ein Sof and existence, that's covered through Eir and through Tzimtzum. Eir, that there's a Eir HaGvul, the 10 hidden spheres, is an interface to the idea that God wants a structure. But it's not yet in any form of a blueprint even. The Tzimtzum, he explains at length that the Arizal's Chiddush of the Tzimtzum accounts for the infinite distance. So Arizal says there's a Tzimtzum that completely takes a quantum leap from that reality to an independent existence like ours. Fine. Ak comes after the Tzimtzum. So the role of Ak, he says, is not an interface between Ein Sof and existence. It's an interface between the highest level of existence to the lowest level. So it's a klal to a prat. So Ak's role is really creating order. If you just jump from Ein Sof to details, you had no blueprint, and you had no someone giving you general instructions like a foreman or a project head, that would be lacking Ak. So Ak's mamutza is, once already you're identifying existence, it's more of a form of kiruv, as he calls it. Relating to existence, it's the outline before you get to the details. That's the gist of it. That's a Kuf Samach Dalet, a Kuf Samach Hey. Then,
you just said if she went from Klal straight to the details, or went from Ein Sof straight to the details, then what?
Ein Sof is not the Klal.
No, from Ein Sof. If you went from Ein Sof straight to the details, then found out what happened.
So you didn't hear what I said?
Yeah, you didn't. I don't think you spelled out.
It's a jump that's illogical. You couldn't. It's like saying that you don't have a blueprint by which to follow. It would be a jump that would be. It's not a interface. There's no interface going on. It would be like having details, and that's it. And so it remains removed from the whole existence. Ak is a klal that everything is there. It's like one place where you have a blueprint. Imagine having an architect has a vision and no blueprint is ever made. What kind of building are you going to have? How are you going to build the building? The second half of it, which I always add, is also there's no way back. There's no way for us to refer to anything. From the bottom down, all you can hit is where you're going to go. You go from your details to there's nowhere to go.
I've had contractors like that.
Right.
No.
It's like somebody writing a paper or building something without an outline.
No, but that much was fine. But over here, the architect is the one who's building it, so he knows what's in it, what his vision is.
No, but he's not documented it, so it doesn't make sense to us.
You know your mashal that you use often about the artist and an architect and a builder definitely would use a blueprint. I don't hear, maybe it's true, but I don't hear great artists like Picasso or something. Maybe they do. But a lot of times, it's my understanding, I could be wrong, but a lot of artists don't necessarily have a blueprint of what they're going to put on the canvas. It just sort of like develops.
First of all, if you look at artists, is a big thing market for their sketches that they made that became later a masterpiece. Okay. Almost all of them sketched first.
Almost all of them sketched?
Yeah.
Okay.
And now the fact that someone can be a genius and can jump that step, fine. But let's put it this way, no one's going to learn art from that. If that artist wanted to teach anyone how to learn art, he would have to show the steps, how he got from there to there. Then you're just saying a person who's a genius, he could jump some steps. But,
So it gets more to the part of us relating back to God through art.
That's the second half. But I know, but that ayah, that doesn't say in Ayin Beis. That's my hasbara of it. It doesn't say this. In Ayin Beis, it's basically, the simple logic is it's a much more logical, God wanted a logical structure. If there's any jump that becomes illogical, and only because God can do it, it doesn't have logical structure. But my explanation, why do we need a logical structure, is number one, because God wanted an order. Number two is that we can then retrace the steps. That's my havana in it. But the bottom line is that makes it definitely more logical this way.
getting back to that artist, even if he does sketch, the one thing is the blueprint enables us to understand how he creates the building, by learning it from our perspective. You can look at the wiring and look at how he's putting it all together. A sketch by an artist, even if he does it, still doesn't tell us how he, it's not...
What you call, you do, this is called like a legal, technical... Let me ask you a question. Can you build a structure? You decided to take my example of the artist. I also gave an example of an architect and a building.
Right.
Does your logic fit there too?
No.
Okay, so why don't you use that muscle for that?
But I'm just trying to apply it to the other one.
So not every muscle works in every detail. Frankly, I'm not concerned, because in the artist, he's also doing it in some step. There's no way he's just jumping to detail. There has to be in his mind a vision, and he's somewhat...
Yeah, but your point about the blueprint, as I understand it, is that it enables us, Lamata, to be able to trace our steps back, because we can look at his blueprint, the Torah, and get an understanding how we decided to build it.
Because an artist is a selfish artist. He doesn't care about anybody except himself. That's the reason. Now, why don't you think of it this way? What would we be like if God did not give us a Torah? We wouldn't be sitting here talking about any of this. We would be like the animals
running wild in the streets.
Exactly. Enjoying ourselves.
1960s.
The point of the matter is, yes, the example of the artist to me works regardless, because everybody needs outline, even an artist. He's just not putting it on paper, but he's doing it in his head. What's the difference? You don't think he's thinking of what he's creating, or he just closes his eyes and whatever comes out in his paintbrush?
That's my artist.
No, I'm just saying. So he's doing it in his head. He's not doing it on paper. Besides that, I think that most artists do sketch it, and as writers do. Writers outline, lay it out. Doesn't mean they can't sometimes jump that step, but they're not jumping it. They're just speeding it up by just doing it in their heads instead of that. I can tell you right now, sometimes I'll write an outline, sometimes I'll develop it in my mind. For the muscle here, for the practical purpose, it's the same thing. Let's put it this way: can you do details without an outline? Is it possible? Yeah, and you think an artist just paints things? You think he doesn't make any outline, then goes back and fills it in? He's also making an outline, and he's starting with a general picture and then going to the details. But that's already technique, methods, and so on. You see, what you're doing is get back to the Havon of it relevant to us. The bottom line is, Ak is an all-encompassing picture where the whole image of existence is there. That's the bottom line. That's what it comes down to. Find whatever examples you want to work. The architect works. The artist doesn't work perfectly, so don't. So don't go with that. In other words, don't get hooked on it unless it bothers you in the nimshal. Now, then he goes on and says that in truth the plot thickens. That Ak really also has a Pnimius Ak. This Chitzenius Ak is the klal to existence, but Pnimius Ak is like Atik. So Chitzenius Ak is like Arich, the macrocosmic Arich of Keser, and Pnimius Ak is like Atik. He brings the whole proof that Atik, there's an Atik similar to Atik above Ak, which is like Malchus of Ein Sof becomes Atik of Ak, or Atik you can say of the whole of existence, and that level is somewhat of a piece of Ein Sof, which is also consistent with what we've learned till now, because remember, the interface for it to be complete, you can't just stop by the klal. You wonder, how does the outline connect to above the outline? So the bottom line is that God envisioned that Shir Atzmei B'Koyach is the 10 hidden spheres. He envisions existence. That, however, is in a state that's completely the part of the divine omnipresence before the Tzimtzum. The Tzimtzum conceals that state. Ak emerges, but in two stages. One is the Pnimius Ak. That still retains that Shir Atzmei B'Koyach, almost like the spirit of the artist envisioning existence. And Chitzenius Ak translates that into a blueprint. So the blueprint part is closer to us. It's a klal that already has similarities. It's going to be the beginnings of what existence is going to look like. And Pnimius Ak, behind it, is the vision of the one who wrote the blueprint.
Can I read a short sentence that he says here? der erste Schuss hat genutzt, nicht näher zu sein. So wie in das Attic Tag.
Yeah.
And then goes or Shabbat Begilui LaAchretz and so or so wie in das Arch.
That's
That's kind of what you
yeah. And if you look now again, you'll find this exactly. Which chapter?
Page 9 test.
Yeah, Chav Zayin.
Test with Lamed.
Okay, yeah. Well, if you look in chapter Kuf Samach Ches now, Kuf Samach Zayin, page Shin Lamed Vav, you'll find this even more detail. These two steps you just said.
Which page?
336. This is a few pages ago. I'm summing it up. Yeah. Very consistent, exactly right. Here, in this, where we are now, he's just much more detailed about it. And if you really want to be thorough, you can also look at chapter 122. Just for the record. So it's a recurrent theme. It's going back. It's not surprising. Yeah. See the page says Vav, right? Okay, very good. Good. Okay. So now we have two aspects to Ak, the Primi Yisak. But then he goes back to returns to Chitzeni Yisak, because that's the real operative discussion here. Because Staka Baraisa Bar Alma is primarily Chitzeni Yisak, not Primi Yisak. Just for the record, all this is based on a Maimer from the Alter Rebbe, said Pasha Kisisa Tov Kuf Samachei. Just in case you're wondering.
What, the whole time base?
This whole discussion of Chitzenis and Primi Yisak and Zman HaMokim and so on. It's a Maimon, the Alter Rebbe said that Shabbos, and it is printed also in the Tzemach Tzedek has. The Rebbe Rashab uses the Tzemach Tzedek's version of it with many additions. It's printed in Biurei HaZeir, Parshas Truma. Because I believe Istaka Baraisa Bar Alma is from Parshat Truma. Was that right? Did he say that? I think so. Yep, Zayar Truma, Tavkuf Samach Aleph Amar Aleph. So the Biurei HaZeir and that Zayar. So basically, chapters 162 till here is all that. That's the Maimer of the Alter Rebbe. You learn that, it tremendously helps to understand this. This is, however, far more elaborate and really explains that Maimer very, very thoroughly.
Yeah, the Maimer is where?
Kisisa Tovkuf Samachei, but it's printed in Biurei HaZeir of the Tzemach Tzedek on Parshat Truma. Okay, now begins.
What do you mean? It's not printed in the Sefer Tovkuf Samachei?
First of all, Tovkuf Samachei just was printed the last few years.
Yeah.
So Biurei HaZeir is printed.
Right. But the last few years that it was printed, it should be there, right?
It's when the Rebbe, Alter Rebbe said Mamorim, there were between 4 and 5 manichim who wrote it down. One was his brother Mariel, who led. There was a Pinchas Rezes. There was the Mittler Rebbe. There was Rab Moshe, another son of the Alter Rebbe, and there was Tzemach Tzedek. So there are Mamorim we have all 5 versions of. They wrote very different styles. Very interesting. It's very interesting to study their differences.
They do Chazal together afterwards.
They probably did.
Yeah.
They may have, but they still wrote it differently. Tzemach Tzedek obviously was younger, so he doesn't have anachos from earlier years, but you have from all, and you have different. Teira Elukut Teira is primarily Maimonim. Mariel was considered to be the closest to the actual language, and very clearly written. So a lot of the Pinchas is number 2 in precision of what was said. Mittler Rebbe is Arichas. Everything from Alter Rebbe he adds a lot on. Tzemach Tzedek takes issue with that quite a number of times. He'll say this is not Lashon Hara, but Teichen. He'll say this is from my father-in-law. This is Tzemach Tzedek is, however, the most accurate. You can, if you want to put, I don't know if the word accurate is right. He's the most precise in connecting it to everything, and he compared them all. You could see that he's like the ultimate. So if anything you have from the Tzemach Tzedek, it's usually the best Hanach, if you can call it that. They're obviously all holy Hanachas, and they're all reliable. Of course, that goes without saying. But so in this Tavkuf Samachay one, you see, compare the Tzemach Tzedek to the Mitler Rebbe and to Rab Moshe. You have three. Tzemach Tzedek is the clearest, and the Rebbe Rashab used the Tzemach Tzedek, even though he probably had the manuscripts of the others. Now, there's nothing in the Mitler Rebbe that's the Mitler Rebbe, however, is more complicated because he adds Havana to it. The Tzemach Tzedek is more scientific almost. And I'm trying to qualify it in the proper way. It's just different styles. But the Havana is the same. For example, if you learn the Bir Azayah and then you learn the Tzemach Tzedek, then you learn the Mitler Rebbe, you understand the Mitler Rebbe is much better. If you only learn the Mitler Rebbe, it's harder to understand. Mitler Rebbe is very dense and very complicated. Tzemach Tzedek is like, so, for example, there's a contradiction between Chetzeni Yisak, Pnimi Yisak. The Mitler Rebbe will just say the two things. Tzemach Tzedek will start analyzing. 1 second it says this like this, and earlier we said that. Tzemach Tzedek is like much more teaching it, in a way.
I thought the Mitler Rebbe was elaborate.
More elaborate, yeah, but not elaborate doesn't mean necessarily teaching. More elaborate means much more. It's like just a flow of consciousness. It's like it's overwhelming. Actually, Mitler Rebbe is overwhelming. Whenever you read the Mitler Rebbe, it's like a sea. Just goes on and just overwhelming. Elaborate doesn't always mean clear. Elaborate for him is more elaborate. For us, it's harder. I would say.
Even though it's more words.
It's more words. And yeah, because it's really a flow of consciousness. That's the bottom line. Tzemach Tzedek will stop and say, "Didn't we say before that this is the other way?" He'll bring up contradictions that we'll pick up. The Mitler Rebbe will just continue on, and you have to pick it up on your own. Chaz v'sholom. I can't say any yachlachem l'kabel. It's part of Chassidus, and it's hard. It's just hard. I find it's very hard. The Mitler Rebbe, however, entire sections of Ayin Beis are built purely on the Mitler Rebbe, not even on the others. Sometimes there are things the Mitler Rebbe only uses the Mitler Rebbe. Look, also Mitler Rebbe was the only one, on the other hand, that published actually books, Shari Eira, Shari Amuna. He published. You have to learn. It's hard for me to explain it. I don't want to come across that I'm like saying one is better than the other. That's ridiculous. Each has their role. The Mitler Rebbe was Bina, and the Alter Rebbe was Das. Mitler Rebbe is technically harder to learn. That's all I will say. It's deeper in a way. It's a flow. It's very, very much like a learning. That's like really allowing yourself to just go into the waters of Chassidus and taking over, without just letting go. Tzemach Tzedek will be much more logical, precise, breaks it down. We'll quote it. For example, Eitz Chaim is quoted by the Alter Rebbe. So Mitler Rebbe will just quote it and explain it. Tzemach Tzedek will go to the Eitz Chaim and quote and say the Eitz Chaim says like this. It's a little different. He'll like ground it into like almost. It's very that way. It's very technically correct. He'll connect it to other places that says in other places.
The words that look at the Torah are mainly the Mario.
Well, the Tzemach Tzedek chose, they say, from 2,000 Maimorim Likutei Torah. He chose the ones he chose. He looked at all the Hanochas. He primarily chose Mariel. Mariel was almost like the Alter Rebbe, undiluted. The Mitler Rebbe, there's always more Havana. But then we have a Hanoch of the Mitler Rebbe of Maimorim and Torah. Then you have Teres Chaim, the Mitler Rebbe saying that Maimor as a Rebbe himself. That's even more elaborate. You have to look at inside. It's really hard to explain. It's hard to explain because it's not like the Mitler Rebbe suddenly added new things. It's just the way when the Alter Rebbe would say something, the Mitler Rebbe would take 10 lines to say it. The Mariel would say it in 1 line. So
But when the Tzemach Tzedek made a Hanacha of a Maimer from the Alter Rebbe, would he still choose the Mariel's version and to put into Likutei Torah and Torah, or would he always use his own, or did he just put his aside?
To be honest, someone said was born what year? Tov Kuf Nun. Not Sam. No. Nun Tes. He was born Tov Kuf Nun Tes. Rosh Hashanah. So you have to remember, in Tov Kuf Nun Tes, he was only 10 years old when many of the Maimorim, 10 to 15. So the Hanochas he wrote would have been very later, much later. And the ones that we have from him I would say not hanochas is what he read from the others and wrote notes on it. So, for example, Likutei Torah are mostly, he for sure did not use his own. Because he wouldn't have that many. I'm just thinking technically, when did he actually, I'm thinking what hanochas do we have from the Tzemach Tzedek of the Mitna? The Tzemach Tzedek definitely heard the Alter Rebbe, and you have his, I may have to stand corrected. I don't know if there's a real hanocha, or he took their hanochas and he has additions to it.
How old was
that? May be I'm thinking, but there were definitely not, because there's definitely things Tzemach Tzedek writes clearly. I heard from my grandfather. I'm just trying. Tzemach Tzedek, if he was born Tavkuf Nun Tes, and the Alter Rebbe passed away Tavkuf Ayin Gimel, how old was he? Tzemach Tes? Yeah,
14.
He was 14, right? So I know most likely there are no hanochas. No, I stand corrected. There are. It looks to me that he took the other hanochas and then would write things added and add things he heard from the. He was only 14. He's sure he was born Memtes. He wasn't born Memtes. No. I think he was born Memtes. I think I'm mistaken here. The Stalkers was Tafresh Chavav, 26. Yeah, I think it was Memtes. I think it was Tafkuf Memtes. Not this. Yeah. I could look it up. I'm almost positive there are hanochos from Tzemach Tzedek, but there are not a lot of them. They're definitely later. And Likutei Torah has very few additions from anybody. Likutei Torah has a whole bunch of additions from the Tzemach Tzedek. They're written. They're mostly hanochos of the Mariel. Some from the Mittler Rebbe, some from a Pinchas, with in many places additions from the Tzemach Tzedek. Rezus, his name was.
Because you would think that he would generally if he has hanachos himself, he wrote that he would have included those.
Not necessarily. He probably, It's a good question. I would have to look it up. So now, then we get into a much more dense discussion, and that's time and space. To understand the interface of Ak, you have to understand the nature of existence. So he began discussion, chapters 168 and 169, the last two chapters. The nature of existence is governed by time and space. He began first a discussion on space. Briefly explained that space is, first of all, let's talk about physical time and space. Everything is governed by time and space. What's time and space? Time is past, present, and future. And space is location. Everything occupies a space. We, in an earlier part of the Hemshech, he wrote, we cannot conceive of something outside of time and space. Try to think of something that has no space and no time. It's very difficult to do so. However, this exercise in this last two chapters forces you to start thinking of time and space in new ways. So what I'm going to say now, we elaborate over 6 classes. It's all on videotape. I'm not going to go over all those 6 classes now because there's a lot of time, a lot of elaboration. I'll just sum it up, I think, in a way that can really be hopefully helpful to all of us. So it begins with the discussion, that's time and space on the physical level. Then he goes on spiritual. Spiritual worlds also are under time and space. But there, time and space has a different meaning. What is the meaning of spiritual space? She says the meaning of spiritual space is maila, quality, something's value. That's its space. Its value. Its significance. For example, 2 plus 2 is 4. I'm giving you my own example here. It doesn't occupy any space, but has significance. It has a meaning. It identifies an idea, a formula. 2 plus 2 equals 4. Or for that matter, any number, 1, 10, a constant. That's space. We'll start with space first. And he explains what spiritual space is. Mekemishal Hadavar says the Maila Hadavar, that's its Mokim. So when you say, for example, a small person of intelligence is in the presence of a far greater person and they're bottled to that person, they have no tfisas Mokim, I don't feel significant. You're not talking about physically, you can be taller than that person. But as far as that's what the word I want to say, your state of being, your state of mind, your presence feels diminished. So presence there would not be physical, it would be ethereal. Okay. I gave my own example when you say there are people who are not makeres mekemam. they're in the presence of something, and they're not recognized where they are. Suddenly imagine a little pisher starting talking to a great scholar, like as if he's his equal. Not what means makris mekayim. You have to know, you have to recognize your space where you are. Standing in front of the Rebbe, you have to recognize is you're in a different. So space there doesn't mean what room you're in, what physical space. It means recognizing the significance of the presence around you. Then he goes on and says, the truth is in Gashmius also. A description of something is also its quality. For example, when you say, he gave an example, Daimim, Shemeach, Elam HaDaimim, the space of Daimim. You don't mean the physical space where minerals hang around, you mean their quality. Their quality, they're the kingdom of mineral kingdom. Then there's the world of vegetation, there's the world of animal kingdom. But there, in Gashmius, its description and its category, he calls it categorization, also has physical manifestation because it's physical items. In spirituality, it's only quality. It just doesn't. So it describes you the quality of something, but doesn't take on any type of tangible parameters, basically. Then he goes on and explains that there in this space itself, there's several levels. There's physical space as we know it, measured in tangible terms. There's spiritual space in Atzilus, which is completely quality. So it's the quality of something. And then there's Biyah, like the angels. And we find places where you see that even spiritual ideas somewhat are measured in physical terms. You'll say, for example, an angel is a third of the world. It's two meanings, whether he's a third of the world or the world is a third of him. What does that mean? Or that some angels can travel in one step, others take 2 steps, others takes 3 steps, 4 steps. So I explained the length because there are spiritual realities, like when the angels came to Avram Avinu, are they spiritual or are they physical? The answer is they're spiritual forces manifesting in ways that Avram saw them as nomads. He didn't have a spiritual vision. It wasn't a dream. They did manifest. They were there. They were dressed. They ate. He was achnasas archim. Whether they needed to eat or not, the Medrash says they didn't need to, but they did eat. They even ate tongue and mustard. So it wasn't just theoretical. Yeah? As we all know, theoretical tongue and mustard doesn't taste the same. Huh?
Was there rye bread?
Who knows? Carbs? You mean carbs?
The doctor
It wouldn't make a difference because they wouldn't gain any weight.
the doctor were to cut them and make an operation. Would he find all the organs, the 365 and everything, the heart?
It's a good question. It's a good question. He says, if someone decides to be a cannibal, would you find the organs inside of them and stuff like that?
In other words, would you just look the outer appearance, or they had everything that we have inside?
It's a good question. Who knows? It says when Moshe.
No, because then they're just like human beings. At that moment, they're just like a human being. The blood, with everything, and it's possible to kill. I mean.
So how would you?
Is this helps understand that in Beis or confuses matters?
If that was the case, how would you qualify them as shlish oilim?
See, this is begeder this is a marathon college debate. You go all night and then you realize no nafkamina. Is there nafkamina? You're asking a different question. It says in the Medrash, Ozel Karta Holach Ben Musa. You come to a city, you behave like customs of the land. That's what the Medrash says. 2 examples.
But we're also spiritual entities. We're here for
90
years.
The angels.
For a few minutes. It's the same idea.
So, how does that change our discussion?
Right. No, just saying the way.
So the Medrash says 2 examples. One is the angels that came out of Avram Avinu. They don't need to eat. They ate because that's what you do with the custom of the land. Second example is when Moshe went up on the Har. He didn't eat because that's the custom up there. They don't eat. So there's 2 opinions in Medrash. When he didn't eat, did he have tsar? Or didn't he have tsar? So maybe that depends on this. In other words, did he actually assume that personality and therefore, just like them, they have no tsar? Or he went by their customs, but inside he was starving. The Rebbe speaks about this and says it's 2 dargis in his slapshas basically. There's sometimes these slapshas, for example, when it says Ashkin has been golus. It says that he has pain with us. Then sometimes you say the Shekhinah is removed a bit. It's just a matter of how much you actually have to adapt. This is again halacha too. Like for example, if you travel Yom Tov in Israel or America outside of Israel, you do 2 days, 1 day. It really comes down to where your real place is. If your Rav is somewhere else, if your home is elsewhere, that type of thing. So there's sometimes you do it out of the custom simply because you won't put on film publicly because everyone's not putting on film, but privately you will. because there's something to respect. So it's a good question. I'm saying your point is well taken. It doesn't. The bottom line is the difference between a Sham and a Malach is a Malach retains its spiritual personality. They clearly went back to where they began. They didn't remain on earth. It was a momentary mission, and that was that. And Varai, they couldn't do two shlichusin, so they didn't take on the real properties of a human being.
There's no body to bury.
There you go. So you can make answer halachas just what happened to these angels. Well, there were a lot of bodies to bury in Zdaim. That I can tell you.
Just in case they come back again. I don't know what's
the bottom line is the point. Anyway, so we have really almost three levels in how time evolves, space evolves. Then he goes and says the same thing as with time. My guess why I began with space before time, even though his real focus is on time here, because time is harder to understand than space. Because time. Okay, so what's the difference between physical time and spiritual time? That's the question now. So he says like this. Just for the record, okay, so Atzilus is Seder, Atzilus is Mokim Ruchni completely. Just quote, from Malchus of Atzilus comes Biyah. This is already Mokim Ruchni also, but Mokim Gashmi is Tefes Mokim, meaning it has to relate to it, has to consider it. And shouldn't bother us, because there are times spirituality considers physical parameters, sometimes it doesn't, okay? And then he goes in Mamish Mokim Gashmi. Now he goes, the same thing is He explains.
Where are you reading?
I'm reading at the bottom of page 339. I'm just summing it up.
Yeah.
I'm summing it up. So he says like same thing with time, and he says two things. Besides the fact that all of existence is under time, because we are finite creatures that began. Before that, we didn't exist. Each individual and collectively, existence has a beginning. So therefore, that immediately tells you there's a time you didn't exist. So that means you're under the control of time. You're governed by time. Which really means you have a beginning and an end, essentially. What's the second? The second aspect he says about time, and this is where he starts explaining what the so-called spirituality, the source, the soul of time is. What really makes the distinctions between one moment and the next? So this again, taken from the Maimorim before, it basically says it comes from what's called Ratzeh V'Shuv. Ratzeh V'Shuv is a movement. It's a movement of contraction and expansion, like the breath. So every breath in the physical world becomes a second. In the spiritual, it'll just be the two movements of contraction and expansion. So as opposed to space is the quality of something, its value. Time is its relationship. Think of it of its contextual relationship with other entities. So it's a relationship, what he calls first Ratzeh V'Shuv and later Gdima V'ichur, precedence and what is the opposite precedent? Antecedent, right? Precedent and antecedent. Antecedent, right. So what's precedent and antecedent? Are you sure?
Yeah.
Okay, fine, so be it. Kedima v'Ichur means cause and effect, think of it, like Siba Mesubov. For example, 1 and 2, no one says 1 was created first and then 2 came second. But in logical sequence, 2 comes after 1. 1 and 1 is 2. And 2 plus 2 is 4. So think of it like theoretical hierarchy. It's not physical hierarchy, it's theoretical hierarchy. That's essentially time. And time, therefore, in its ethereal state, is this energy within existence that is pulsating. And that pulsation creates the shifts between 1 second and the next, and so on and so on. That's how he explains it. As I said, I elaborated much more about it, but this is briefly what he said. And this too has these three states that I mentioned. There's time in Atzilus called Seder Zmanim, that pure conceptual time. Then you have time in our world, which is like physical time. Does he say about time in Biyah? I think so also, yeah. But Melech Malachim Lech, Malchus. In Malchus, you have Melech Malachim Lech, you have the concept of a beginning of past, present, future, but it's still not, in the fullest sense, physical time. In Biura Hazer that I mentioned, Tzemach said, the Maimon of the Alter Rebbe actually, he brings a story of the Baal Shem Tov to I don't know why the Rebbe Rashab doesn't bring it, but he brings a story of the Rebbe with the Baal Shem Tov and his brother-in-law, Rav Gershon Kitover, where he writes to him about something that didn't yet happen in his life. And when he asked him, how did you know? She says, because in Biyah, when you go beyond higher than physical time, you can see things faster. But he says that he didn't go to Ak and Atzilus. It was Biyah. Because in Biyah, something like, I think, like something that takes usually 3 months, there you can see it in 1 second. So you see there too some relationship with time, but it's not completely outside of time. It's just the best way to really, my way of explaining it fast, it's a little different. I'll tell you how I would see it. If time is let's say a river, a flow of river, and you're on the boat on the river, and imagine a bird that can see the banks of the river, so you can only see today what you see right now. Yesterday was where the boat was yesterday. Tomorrow the boat will be, but if you're a bird, you can see yesterday, today, and tomorrow. It's just a bird's eye view, so to speak, of time. In space, it's easier to relate to. Space, someone say, all I see is 5 inches. Well, go up on the mountain and you'll see a few miles. Like we say, you're in a plane, you can see a lot more space. You could see all the space is equalized from a higher place. It's harder to imagine this in time, but in time, there's a similar idea, basically. And the higher you go. Now, after stating that, he says, but this is all in existence, time and space. Spiritual existence, physical existence. What about Elokus? Elokus is L'mayla Mizman. I'm now in chapter 169, where we're up to. Elokus is higher than time altogether. Like he says, Mi'ika skeno kamei kodesh baruch. There's no aging in time in front of God, before God. So he says, what does that mean? That's the Reishis Akav. It calls it Pnimius Ak. Or Atik, as he explains. That there's no inyan even of Ratzin and Shuv. So even spiritual time doesn't exist. And here the Rebbe Rashab citing the Maimer Vayechulu and Samach Vav explains that there's an order of time in Atzilus. That would be, for example, Chachma and Bina. Now Chachma and Bina not bound by time. But Bina is a result of Chachma. So that's its spiritual time. That it's a product of. So in our case, when you say father and mother and children, so we know parents and children, besides being preceding them in hierarchy, also precede them in time. Children can't be born before parents. That's a rule. But in the spiritual world, Chachma and Bina is the parents of Midas. That doesn't mean Midas came after Chachma and Bina. When after there doesn't mean physically after, like children, because there's no physical time. After there means a product of. It's hard to imagine because basically you have to really think of it in terms of these things are happening all the time. But what's happening? Different realities are emerging from different realities. The complicated part is how to conceive it without any past, present, or future as we understand it. So I gave some examples or some techniques how one can do that. The best way to do that, frankly, is not to think you can't think from don't imagine it from our context. You have to think the other way around. Think of Atzmus Ein Sof, where there's no nothing. There's no distinctions. And then he chose distinctions, but he didn't yet create what we call past, present, and future. You have to think of it completely theoretically, conceptually, to get any sense of it. Because if you try to figure it out in time, you'll say, okay, 1 second, what are you telling me? So when exactly did Midas come out of Chachma, Meichen, and Atzilus? You're already defeating the whole purpose as soon as you ask that. What do you mean when it happened? When there's no when yet. That's why it's so hard to put our heads around, wrap our heads around it. But nevertheless, you could conceive it. I gave also another example, using William Blake's line, to hold infinity in the palm of your hand. We believe Torah mitzvahs, and this is what he, by the way, discusses at length in the Maimer of the Alter Rebbe. When you do a mitzvah, you're taking a second that could have died and turning it into eternity. The mitzvah lives. When we have magical moments in our lives, a person falls in love, when a person got married, a person has a child, it happened in time and in space. But what happened is something beyond time and space. It changed your world forever, and it will live on forever. Avram Avinu lived in a certain time, but what he did has impact about today. So is it timeless or timely? He took Zman and made it L'mayla Zman, basically. So that's how you can begin to relate it in that sense. Yeah. When we're Mekadesh Zman, that's what we do. So a moment basically can die. Every second of our lives is a force, an energy. If you use it properly, it lives on. If you don't, it dies, like anything in the material world dies. So just a way of somewhat, I know it may sound poetic, but the truth is, if you read Einstein about time, he'll speak about time as energy. Time is energy. The fact that yesterday's has passed is simply because we can't identify with that energy, because we live in the little box, in the boat, and all we see is our little view. But time is, and hypothetically, that's why they can talk about travel, time travel, and going back in time. It's just that technically they don't know how to do it, because some say it's impossible because you can't travel faster than the speed of light. But conceptually, no one has an issue with it, because time is energy. Why shouldn't you? It didn't really die. It's not such science fiction. It didn't die. It's just no longer in our reality. Anyway, it's hard to understand it completely, but we discussed it at length. I don't want to go into it because it's a whole new discussion. I'm just giving you the gist of it. Okay. So now, since Elokus is higher than time, and we live under time, how shall these twain meet? The answer is Ak. That's what Ak does. I was going to add one more thing. So that's time, physical time. Then the Seder Zmanim in Atzilus is, like I said, conceptual time. Then he says in Keser, that's Ratzei and Shuv in Atzilus. What he calls Ispashtus and Amshach and Ispashtus.
What's the time called here?
Stalkus Ispashtus, yeah.
How does he define the time here in our world?
He doesn't say, but it's basically Avar, Heva, Asid, past, present, future.
Yeah, but he ties it into Ratzei V'Shuv and Atzilus, right? The pulse.
That's the root of it. Yeah. Yeah, and that's what defines time here. I would have liked to compare it to have a physicist to say how they would define it, let's say from an Einsteinian perspective. Okay, now, in Keser, you can't even call Ratzei V'Shuv, because Keser is closer to the source, so there it's called Mati V'lei Mati. In Samach Vav, it says Mispashet V'lei Mispashet. It explains, it's not like, think of it, a pulse, for example, the heart beating is a very clear a dual movement. It contracts, it expands. Exhale.
So it's the same thing?
No, it's not. That's what he says. Mati V'lei Mati is more... is the source of Ratzei V'Shuv in the root. What is it? Mati V'lei Mati is more, it's almost like conceptual movement. Yeah. Meaning, like, in other words, the way he puts it there, you can't really say in the source. These Ratzei V'Shuv, you have to say, is something wants to go back, let's say the blood is rushing back to the heart. In Mati V'lei Mati, it's all within the heart itself. Think of what causes the heart to pump. There must be in the heart two movements. Think of it like two electrical impulses. So it's far more subtle. So Mati V'lei Mati is happening in Keser, and that you can't call it even Seder Zmanim, basically. It's essentially like saying the potential of the two movements, if you wish. There's different ways of explaining it. But regardless, that's all in Chetzenius Keser. In Pnimius Keser, or Atik, or Pnimius Ak, or the Reishis Akav, or Malchus of Ein Sof, or the 10 hidden spheres, it's all the same level. There you can't even refer to it as any type of Zman. Yeshlem is not Shaykh any Mati V'lei Mati either. So if that's the case, so how from there do we get the time? So he says that's what Ak does. Ak has in it both aspects. He calls it Zman and Bli Zman. Ak is a picture of all of existence. So in that sense, it encompasses the whole time of existence and space, but at the same time it encompasses in a way that's not defined by time. Think of it like almost like a permanent blueprint. A permanent blueprint. We'll say in the year Tavshinayin Gimel, a leaf will turn in the wind. But in the blueprint, transcends the actual moment as we understand it. That's the key. That's what that explains even further why this interface is necessary. Because you have in it, number one, it has everything that will come, but it's in a form of beyond time. But you can't call it outside of time, because it's still a picture of all of time. So if you were able to envision that bird's eye view I was mentioning, just get rid of the concept of time, past, present, and future. Just like you can see, if you're standing, let's say you're in a spaceship outside of Earth, you see all of Earth. Think of it, you also see all of time. And it doesn't impact Bechira. We're not talking now. He discusses in that mind, by the way, free will. It's not impacting it. Let's not talk about that right now. But you see it all. You see the whole picture. So are you in time or out of time? So the answer is you're both. You're in time because you're seeing time, but you're out of time because you're not really bound by the time. That's exactly what he says. Pretty cool, huh? No, it's a beautiful, because I was trying to explain it like in relevant terms. In relevant terms, I go back to Simcha. When you are dancing at your child's wedding, or another great, what are you having? Are you in time or out of time? You can identify. What do you mean? It's a day, a second, the hour. It happened in time, but it's an experience out of time. You'll never say it's time-bound experience. It's forever. It's a forever thing. That's why I'm saying that you have to think in those type of terms. Because if you don't, someone say, okay, so a skeptic will say, that's your feelings. It was a moment, that's it, it's over. But in your heart it's not over. What do you mean over? The event is over. But what came of it is not over. And also the memory, it's created an eternal result. Yeah, the birth of a child. It happened at a certain moment. The beauty is that imagine a real chassid, every second, 24/7, is having the simcha like the birth of a child. Every second is producing eternity. That would be something, huh? You wouldn't be bored if you were doing that. There'd be a lot of tzaras we've got rid of.
That's the whole idea. If we continue.
Yeah, but imagine that. Imagine every second feeling the Rotzi B'Shuv, feeling the refreshing reality of a new birth.
Interesting. Since you like psychology, there's also the dark side of that. The holding on to things and living with them.
That's a little maza. Yeah, that's a little maza.
Let go.
That's called haunting, being haunted.
Not being able to let go.
But something. But the Gemara, interestingly, the Gemara says, for example, with death, that by 12 months a person starts forgetting the impact of the shock. So memory, but in this world we do our memories fade, and for that maila, in a world that's imperfect, there's certain things that should be suddenly dissipate.
Because you would live with traumas forever.
But why is the din, for example, you're not allowed to forget learning Torah? He's been tichas tam Torah. The Alter Rebbe brings because ain't shich tachas kisik v'decha. Torah is alakus. Forgetting it is like giving death in a place where it's eternal life. You're like killing eternity. So that's why. So the real things should live forever. Listen, the Asad Lavi, the reason Tchis HaMesim will have Chaim Nitzchim, it's not just a reward. It's going back to the natural state that if Adam HaChava had not punctured existence and corrupted it, why shouldn't life be here forever? This way, death actually, I said this the other day also, time, the limitations of our time, that their beginnings and ends are actually a wake-up call that our reality is not real. So in a way, our limits of time, space, time as in beginnings and ends, has also a quality to it. It reminds you, don't think you're here forever, don't think you are a forever reality unless you connect to something that's forever. Not just because you're here means you should be here. You have to earn it. I think it's a very powerful way of looking at what and maybe even helps us understand why we can't understand things outside of time, because we're very selfish. It's very hard to think. Like, what's taka happening when you have a simcha or something, that moment is frozen forever. Or not frozen, it lives on forever. What's happening is you're not about the yesh. That's what's going on. Yesh is all about, here's my schedule, the time is over, I make $2,000 an hour, or whatever it is, or a second, depending on your financial, right? And that's it. It's all defined in very Gashmizdika terms, which is born and dies all the time. As soon as you bring Ruchnis into the picture, you're dealing about something that's not bound by Gashmis in that type of sense. I mean, there's a lot to say. How do you understand the appreciation of spiritual time helps us elevate ourselves from the binds of time and space as we know it.
You mean a timeless memory? We would often refer to something as a timeless experience, a timeless memory.
The thing is, the beautiful thing is that mitzvahs were given to time. We're going to learn Torah and mitzvahs are given into the world of time. We're soon going to learn that Torah is it bound by time or not bound by time. Because on one hand, Torah talks about times, but on the other hand, it's higher than time. So the answer is going to be is that ultimately a mitzvah is the only way you can really perpetuate and go and bring higher than time into time. Because existence, and Samach Vavi says, when he explains, the whole point of explaining time there is that the Ratzon for Elamus is a Ratzon that is finite. The Ratzon for Mitzvahs is a Ratzon that's infinite. Basically, it's what we were talking about, Medida Atzmis, that God wants a mitzvah, not because we live in a limited world, because God shows the parameters of a mitzvah, allowing us to go into our limited parameters and bringing Bli Gvul into Gvul. That's really what it comes down to. It would be fascinating if someone could demonstrate that Einstein and the other physicists who began appreciating the time in new ways are really having a spiritual vision, essentially. Because I can see a very business-like person in this world to say, hey, my friend, time, don't live in your fantasy.
Time is money.
Time is money. We all die, your time dies, and that's it. It's all over with. The idea of a time being connected to beyond time is clearly a not a real chumristic way of looking at things. It's a whole different way of looking at it.
They're considering making a new type of currency, which is time value. If you want to buy something, you have to give a certain amount of your time.
Okay.
Don't we say though that the neshamas are above time? A neshama, don't we say that neshamas are eternal? They have an eternal existence. Chaim nitzchim bli hafsek, or they go on just a different forever. And don't we say that it comes also from Chelik Elokam Mamish, that there was an olamos of neshamas that preceded creation of the world?
We say it, but then we say a neshama is put into a body that is very much governed by time.
The body is, but the neshama itself.
It's not right now. The connection here. Let me just answer the following. Basically, say nefesh ruach neshama is bound by the time and space of the body, and chay yechida is not. So when you touch the yechida of somebody, you can touch a place that transcends time. That's like tshuva, going beyond time. But that's the deepest levels of neshama. But like we say, achas b'shana Yom Kippur, achas means one, but also means singular, that it's beyond time in a way.
It's correct to say, though, that the essence of the soul...
Well, I would say the same context. I'd say it's up to us. It's up to us. It's up to us. If you live in a way that you're bound by time and space, then that's your reality. And if you're able to connect the parts of the soul that are beyond time and space, that becomes your reality. In other words, it all comes down to what our conscious reality is. You're talking conceptually.
Conceptually.
Yeah, but that's conceptually is meaningless, practically speaking. Yeah, because everything is... The world is also driven by forces that are beyond time. But we're not aware of it, and we're not accessing it.
No, but we don't say everything is eternal in the world, right? Some things will disintegrate and never exist again.
Well, the chayas aleki, you will say, is eternal. The chayas, not the physical bodies. The chayas can be eternal.
But an entity in this world that we can identify. We can identify your neshama and mine.
No, a neshama, yes. A neshama is... The neshama is like Oyer has a nitzchis to it. Neshama is nitzchis because it's an extension of the divine. Like Oyer is and Kalim in a way. The Oyer, because it's Davuk, because it's an extension of divine energy, so it assumes the properties of eternal elements of the divine. Yeah, that's exactly right. The challenge is, how do you make the Oyer and the Keli join? That the Keli should also experience it without being annihilated. What you're touching is exactly the whole purpose of this interface. That's what you want. You don't want Ak to destroy time. You want it to elevate time. Look, we live in a world where people get bored, right? They're bored, routines, monotony, etc. If you know that Machshava, like the Rebbe says this, the Rebbe Friedrich Rebbe in Hayem Yem, that even when a leaf turns over in the wind, it was preordained in the choreography of Ak, right? Machshava Ketubah Ak. And this is essentially when the Rebbe writes to so many people letters when they're depressed, or things aren't working. The Rebbe have to say, remember, every detail of your life is identified in Machshava. There's nothing meaningless. You don't have a meaningless life. What's the Rebbe saying? Your consciousness should be aligned with that. The fact is, we sometimes ignore it. But imagine you were able to envision that every second of your day today and tomorrow is there. It's like it's in the map. It's preordained. I'm not talking about your free will now, what you do with it.
Right.
And you live your life that way, everything changes. Your life has absolute significance and a big plan. If you don't do what you're supposed to be doing, you mess up the plan. Tell me how many lives would change, how the world would be different if every one of us thought that way all the time. Everything would change. We become self-absorbed, and all we think about is ourselves and our immediate needs. We forget we're part of a bigger plan. Anyway, so that's what he says is ak. Then the last parenthesis which we learned, he speaks about Yechidus, Machshava Achas. Machshava Dayan. So Yechidus is not Metzias. Metzias, when something is abundant, that means it's not Achas Yachid. So ak is one thought. One thought encompasses the whole picture. He says one thought that is beyond existence. Is beyond existence. So look at the last three lines in Shimon Malaf. Hari Shaba'ak yesh ba'in zman u'bli zman. Shari iyef she'einu b'chinas zman klal. You can't say it's not in time at all. Shari you made a b'kom okem b'chinas skirachas, because at the end of the day it's at least one image. V'gam einu b'chinas zman. You can't call it inside time either. Shari eskal sheba yoshem sham b'chinas bilti mitzias. L'gam ve'einu shayach sham gedima ve'ichur. That's the bottom line. Because it's all encompassed. The one you can't even speak about before and after.
Why not? In Ak.
Okay. So Ak is basically concludes is both the Tchilas Esav is the beginning of all of existence, but also that which encompasses everything.
Oh, it has both halves.
Yeah. It's like when I say Rosh Hashanah is the first day of the year, but also encompasses the entire year. Okay, that's it. Let me learn at least the end of the Maimon. Any questions, my friends? It's food to thought. I'm not saying you don't have to master it today,
right?
But at least you have something to think about.
How does Mati Low Mati fit with Mati? Do they work together? For me,
one is the source of the other.
Yeah, one is perspective of Mata Mata, one perspective of Mata Mata.
No, where did you get that from?
I thought maybe that was the case.
No. I explained in Chassidus, it explains everything as you climb to more subtle levels. Anything that's on a more, that's called tangible expression down below, on higher levels is more subtle. So for example, I mentioned about Abba ve'ima. Parents and children. So we say, for example, parents and children, the way we understand it. So parents are born first, and then they give birth to their children. So their children are their product. They precede them in time, and so on and so forth. When you speak about Av Tulda, for example, in Hilchos Shabbos, Lamates Avos Malachos, and the Tuldas, you right away understand, we're not talking here parents and children as in one came before the first. One is the rule, and the second is a subset, or we call the theorems and the postulates in mathematics. Right? You have like the general rule, and then it has its subcategories. We talk in Ruchnius, Meichen and Midas. So Meichen, Abba ve'ima, and Midas are like the so-called the Tuldas. There you're talking completely conceptually, right? That's in that type of. So there's no Kedima ve'ichur in the literal sense of the word, but there is definitely Kedima ve'ichur conceptually, because you're talking Meichen and Midas. They're two names. Keser, you can't even say that, because Keser is the Rotzen. Let's say the Rotzen from Meichen, the Rotzen from Midas. So how is it distinguished between Rotzen from Meichen? Meichen and Midas, you could say Rotzen and Shuv. Meichen is one level, Midas is another level, and therefore there's a movement going on. Not a movement that we would take into physical time before and after, but it's definitely a movement of two entities. However they move. conceptual movement. In Keser, you can't call it Ratzon and Shuv, so you call it Mati V'lei Mati. Mati V'lei Mati means there's a subtle shift that this is going to be the Ratzon for Meichen, this will be the Ratzon for Midas. So essentially it's really all in one, but you can't really identify two movements. It would be almost like, I'm just using an example. Before the pulse emerges in a fetus, before the pulsating heart, the heart doesn't start beating the first second of conception. We know that for sure. We know that the cell has been, the egg has been fertilized, the cell breaks, splits into two, then to four. At some point, the heart emerges. Whatever it is. Let's say in day 1, day 2, day 5, whatever it is. So, but we know also the heart didn't come from nowhere. Something in those cells was the beginnings of what will become a pulsating heart. So think of Mati Lei Mati like that stage, where it's not yet the pulsation, but it's definitely movements are beginning to. In Elikus it would be, in Keser would be the Ratzon for Meichen, the Ratzon for Midas, the Ratzon for Ratzeh, the Ratzon for Shuv. If you go even deeper, before the Tzimtzum, you'd say these two is God's ability to shine, L'Hayir, and ability and not to shine. Pure Yechelis, potential. The potential for one, the potential for the other. They're both potential. But he has both potential, so you can't yet call it,
That's a bit to extend of himself.
Yecholte L'Hayir, Yecholte Shaloi L'Hayir is considered like the highest levels. Another way to explain this.
How's it different in Chachma relating to all the other spheres? Isn't everything potentially, just same thing at a higher level.
But it's not the same thing on a higher level. Just like that's why by pointing out, it's. Can you say the heart that was beating inside of us is the same like the heart in the cell before it became a heart? It's not just a quantitative difference; it's a qualitative difference. We can give many examples. Remember, besides the fact that one is physical and one is spiritual, there's also one has structure and one doesn't have structure. Look, the challenge is understanding how things are in their root. In root, things can be, as mysterious as it is. Did you ever see everyone's seen a tree seed. You ever seen a seed of an apple tree? What does it look like? Look inside an apple.
Kernel.
This kernel, without anything injected in it, all it will need is water and being planted and sun, will become a tree that will have a trunk, roots, branches, leaves, fruits. Someone will say, what are you talking about? How could that seed have that all? So, however you want to explain it, it's there. So, why it's difficult for us is because we're very limited. We have myopic vision. We don't relate to things unless we see them very tangibly. So try to explain to somebody how DNA shapes a human being. Once upon a time, we looked at people as being made of organs and limbs. Now we know that it's about 175 trillion cells. I just read 100 trillion microbes just in your gut. 100 trillion. You're talking about numbers here that would be nice. Think of it in your bank account, right? So you have 100 trillion of them, but they're not money. So it's really becoming comfortable with the invisible and understanding that the invisible is the shapes the visible, not the other way around. The challenge is we're visible. We're sensory. Look, 24/7, even when we're asleep, basically. Let's say, we are stimulated by one thing and one thing only: senses, our sensory tools. So we're completely corrupted. We see anything purely by senses. What I see, what I hear, what I taste, touch, and smell. Tell me, how much deep talk about psychology? What has that done to our so-called mental capacity when we're so sensory? So what has it done? We almost don't know. We're probably completely desensitized and numb to any type of other reality. But it's still in there. We have intelligence, we have feelings. But talk about comfort. Our tools, it's like someone working with the whole life with a shovel. And then someone comes and tells you know something, you can do this without a shovel. And you say, what are you talking about? How do I do it without a shovel? Because that's all we know. A tractor is easy, but I'm saying you can do it with through telepathy. You're crazy. But today it's not so inconceivable. We see laser energy can do things that a instrument can do without even touching it. Look what microscopic surgery can do today. It's just miraculous, basically, in a certain sense. In a certain sense, it's not. But that's how I look at it. And I think even when you know this, we still go back to a world that is we are basically absolutely hostage by our senses. There's nothing to talk about. Is that not true? Look, very simple. You could be sitting and learning all these deepest things. If a celebrity suddenly walked into this room, I don't think anyone would be oblivious. Unless you didn't know who the celebrity was. You know? The only one I know that would not be is the Rebbe. He lived in a spiritual world. The Kashmirs didn't make a difference. He could see something that everyone would say, hey, unbelievable. Big thing. So what? It's nothing. Be very refreshing to go to a place like that. Yeah.
So we live in they call it the digital age today, right? Digital age is zeros and ones, which is truly getting back to the source of
absolutely
ultimate source of creation. Because
Igulim and Yosha.
Everything's Ratzu V'Shuv.
Zeros and ones is Igul and Yosha.
Mati and Lo Mati is 0 and 1, and Lahir Below Lahir is 0 and 1.
That's why it's a digital.
No. I would say Mati V'Lei Mati is deeper than the root of zeros and ones, and Lahir Lei Lahir is even.
But it's what I'm just saying is
the zeros and ones are still the digital they've reached is Gashmis compared to Ayin Beis.
I understand that, but the reality is that.
No, I got you loud and clear. Perfectly.
You live in the world of zeros and ones.
Zero and ones, yeah. Especially my bank account.
Zeros, with emphasis on zeros.
There's a lot of
I
zeros.
don't see a celebrity.
The only thing is I'm praying that the one should be in front of the zeros.
Right. It depends where the percentage point is. So it goes like this: Nakuda, Kav, Shetach. So Nakuda is the point, is the decimal point. Yeah. The zeros are the Igulim. The ones is the Kav. And you want the Nakuda to be in the right place.
Oh, wow, that's a mitzvah. But you know,
even Steve Jobs.
So say I learned in Ayin Beis Nakuda, Kav, and Shetach, and I decided that Nakuda has to be placed elsewhere, on the other side of the Kav.
That's why they call this Mashak.
Good morning. Yeah, exactly.
Because the Kud is not in the right place.
Steve Jobs on Apple.
Okay, let me at least finish this mimer. No, listen, it's fascinating stuff, but we should never underestimate the power of the seduction of our senses.
I have a question. Yes, hostage to their senses is hostage to our senses.
We're all still wondering what you're doing with all these lines.
That's another buffer. I know. That's a buffer. I know. I got to give them royalties for the bumper sticker. We are all hostage to our senses. But a question for you.
Yeah. So right, and you know the second half of that bumper sticker.
What?
So watch your wheel. Don't watch my bumper.
Yeah. You know how you said parents have to precede children?
Yeah.
Conceptually,
You can tell me that's not true.
Conceptually, don't we say that God, that when we create something, you conceive of the end, and then you decide how to make it. You first look at the product, and then you decide how to make it. And like Mashiach, Mechareches ala Mayim. First, God looks at the end of the world, Mashiach, and Bereshit started with Mashiach, but it's like looking at the end and then creating it. Meaning that what I'm trying to say is that, conceptually speaking, I'm not saying in this physical world, couldn't you say that God sees that the child before the parent, since that's the product, the product is the goal.
Well, no. Machshava Keduma Da'ak, in the image, you could definitely say he sees all the generations, and therefore sees parents and children and grandchildren and everything.
Right.
That's no problem at all. There's no time there, so right, it's all one. It's like a snapshot.
But don't you see the end first?
That's another discussion about Notzcheles and Sefer. Right now, let's just figure out how it's equal. You're asking a question whether there's a concept of Seif Maisa b'Machshava Tchila. Yeah, but Ak right now he's not even going there. I wouldn't go there right now. Even if there is, it's not because it changes the picture. It's just because there's a quality there. So it's like he wants the end before Yeah, but doesn't change. Yeah,
that's what I'm saying. So according to that, the child is first.
No, that's not in Zman.
That's not in Zman. It's not first. It's first only in Kavana. That would be like. That's not. But as far as Ak goes, we're talking Chachenius Ak. There's no that issue is not relevant. If anything, in Pnimius Ak maybe, because in the Pnimius Machshava, He really cares about that. But it doesn't change the fact that he sees the whole picture at one shot. Here the focus is on seeing the,
And we can't have
we're getting to it. Do you know
we can't have time travel, because then you
Google's
could go back in time and you could be before your parents.
Google's X Lab is working on it.
Yeah.
You know that, Arthur? They're working on time travel.
I don't see any problem with time travel, frankly. Conceptually, for sure not. Practically, I don't know. Practically, if God wants us to do it, He'll do it. If we can't, if He doesn't want it, it won't happen.
Deepest issues in the world, the highest conceivable things like time travel. So they're spending, $10 billion. They've got this special lab. It's the most far out lab trying to transform these concepts, these wild concepts. Time travel is one of them, and the other one is what they did in Star Trek, where you put somebody dematerialized and you send them to.
Beam me up, Scott. Beam me up. Transport. Changing matter to energy and changing energy back into matter.
Working on this in reality. They're paying guys today, engineers and scientists.
I understand. I got it. Because if anybody discovers anything like that, if you can transport somebody in time, and you don't need a plane. It means we don't have to take off our shoes for security. Oh man, you have to take off your shoes when you go to the airport. Can you imagine how much that's worth?
You know the story after Shmoneh he told him Shalom Aleichem because he was there at the time. He just came back from the Yidid. I was speaking about it by the.
I'd love to have conversations with people because let's put it this way: the concepts of time and space, as we know in the Chassidus, definitely is very far out. And no question can be applied to technology. I have no doubt about that. I just don't know enough of the physics of it. But if we had someone with physics and understood, you could. I'm sure that's why me a dream. If you can get them to see something like this, even to imagine it based on these ideas, because then you can really envision a reality. I mean, just like let's put it this way: if you can have a bird's eye view of space, why can't you not have a bird's eye view of time? I don't know if you can go back in time conceivably because of the fundamental conundrum, because you can basically kill your parents and then you don't exist, so how are you there? So the whole thing becomes very difficult to imagine.
Oh, they did that.
You're out of time.
But I could imagine that you're out of time. That's what I said. You can imagine you're out of time, but you can't change the time.
Right.
So I could see. In other words, I could see somebody seeing out of time, but it doesn't mean they can change the time.
What was that from the zone?
No, but Eliezer, 1 second.
I don't need.
It's amazing.
No, the point I'm making is like this: I could see somebody having a bird's eye view of time, like the Baal Shem Tov. It doesn't mean he can rewire it.
Or the Chayzer.
Right? It doesn't mean they can rewire it and change it. That never is said by anybody. Nobody ever changed something if they were able to see the future. They didn't change the future. They just were able to see it. Never says they changed anything.
Couldn't go back to that.
That would be a fundamental problem with a lot of issues, with free will and also God doesn't want that to be.
Tampering with that.
Right.
Divine what?
Even God doesn't do that. He never tampers with the future based on seeing it. Yeah. But also Bechira. Can't say just because he sees the Nazis coming, he will not touch it. But that's because by him it's not because he's seeing it like after the fact. He's not.
That's like another question. Where was God? What do you mean?
They had that story once that there was a show on it. It's called Time. I think it was in the Times. What was it called? Twilight Zone. And had a guy back. He went back into time and then he came back and it was changed. Like his father or something didn't want. And they found out and they said, "What happened?" He went back in time and they checked his shoe. He had stepped on a butterfly. And because of that butterfly, the consequences of it was that some animal didn't eat it, and it turned out that it affected his uncle or brother. Remember this show?
No.
Because they showed it on his shoe. He had stepped on something back then, and that changed what happened later.
Let me just finish the Maimer. Al-Pi Hanal Yuvan. We're just finishing with Ak. Al-Pi Hanal, and according to the above, it's understood. Masha Hadalit Sfarim Nemrum with Pi Shlishi HaMedaber. Remember, he's talking Pasha Dvarim. He's asking the question why Dvarim is different than the other 4 books. The other 4 books, Moses wrote in the what do we say, in the third person. Yeah, he wrote in the third person. Shlishi HaMedaber. Vaydaber Hashem al Moshe. God spoke to Moshe, and this one he spoke in the first person, second person. He spoke to me. So now we'll understand the first 4 Sfarim was speaking Plishli Shemidab. Dihini l'chere in a movement mipnei ma ein mevatlem talmuteirim mipnei mitzvahs shev shal shei shal de'achere. He's prefacing by this because here now seemingly not understood why there's a din that Talmud Torah is a mitzvah t'midus. You have to always learn Torah. Except if there's a mitzvah comes your way that no one else can do, others can't do, you're supposed to be mevatel Torah. This is ein mevatel Torah.
That's mitzvah she'efshel l'aseh.
Right, I'm sorry. Okay, the question is why you're not mevatel. So that's only if a mitzvah that can be done by others. But if it's a mitzvah that could be done, you're not mevatel. So the question is why? Why you're not mevatel Talmud Torah because of a mitzvah that can be done by others. Like for example, somebody's separation of truma. It's not like you can't. You're in the middle of learning Torah, and then it comes as whatever. There's a need to do afrashas truma. You don't have to break to do it because someone else can do it for you. You can hire someone. You can appoint someone to be a messenger to do it. Ve'eich yasik hu b'pirish shabira mitzvah v'layasik b'mitzvah atzma. That's the question. In other words, you're saying it's more important to learn about it than to do it, basically. In other words, it should have been any mitzvah comes your way, whether you could, others can do it or not. You should do it. What's happens with Tamil? Why is Torah? Why is Torah, the mitzvah of Torah, take precedence to the act? It's interesting. How he's going to be yasik? He's going to be involved in the pirush, in the explanation and in the interpretation and explanation of the mitzvah. In other words, technically speaking, he's learning, let's say, Hilchos Truma, Afrashas Truma, and he sends a shliach to do the Truma, and he continues learning because they're mevatel in Talmud Torah before a bit. And especially that there is another category of mitzvah. It's someone else do it for you, but it's not like you did it. You have any examples of that?
He won't get punished for it, but it's like that's
not what he's saying. I think he's saying here there must be a mitzvah, like Afrashas Truma. If the shliach does it, it's like your mitzvah. It was a shliach. No, there have to be mitzvahs like that. In other words, you're supposed to continue learning. For example, Halvayas Hames.
For example, even
Halvayas Hames.
Or
Halvayas Hames. Do you have to battle Torah for Halvayas Hames?
Yeah.
And for Achnos Kal, those two you are battle. That because of the chshivus of that mitzvah, not because of Iyaf Shalasa de Acheret. That's a different thing. But there are mitzvahs. No, there's many mitzvahs. Any mitzvah that comes your way, a mitzvah to give tzedakah.
Or hekdesh.
Mitzvah to give tzedakah. And you decide to sit learn. Someone else gives the tzedakah. You don't have the mitzvah.
Right, so the person got to get tzedakah.
Yeah.
You didn't get the mitzvah.
Yeah.
Or makdish something.
And not your shliach. Yeah. So he's basically saying in that mitzvah, you'll soon see where he's going with this. It's a very critical way of understanding time and space, actually. It's going to be very helpful. So we have to say this compels us to say that there's some fundamental quality of mile of Torah mitzvahs. In other words, mitzvahs, all things being equal, Torah is superior to mitzvahs. That's what you have to say. Because unless the mitzvah, no one else can do it, then the mitzvah. But besides that, Torah is precedent. What's the meaning? Okay. Because mitzvahs are under the governance of time. Mitzvahs matzah b'Pesach, like eating matzah Pesach. The mitzvah of matzah on Pesach, Passover. Shubazeh hazman. It's specifically in this time, the oznim shachim kolam shachas. Only during the 7-8 days of Pesach, that's when these transmissions transmit. The mitzvah Shabbos, same thing Shabbos, mitzvah of Shabbos, Kahai Gavna, etc. Hakol ubizman, everything is in the time. The berega kedim ayachrav, in a second before Shabbos, a second after, or before Pesach, after, lo yesh ha-mitzvah. You can do it all day, there's no mitzvah. Kim bezaz man dafke, rather it's only in that particular time. V'cheinu b'mokim, the same thing in space. There are things that are specifically bound to space, like offerings. They have to be in a particular place that the Torah designates for offerings. Even if you're in the place, but your machshava is outside of the place, somewhere else, it's a machshava schutz, outside of the place where it's supposed to be done. Like chutz lizmana, or a thought that about doing it outside of the time. Let's say you're supposed to bring a korban pesach. You're supposed to bring it in a certain place, a certain time. If your thoughts are elsewhere, it's possible.
You're supposed to eat it within 2 days and a night. So then, if you have in mind that you're going to eat it after that time, then it's considered chutz lizmana and it's people.
Okay, that's mana. But Mokema is with the place of offering.
Outside of that, well, if you eat it outside where you're allowed to eat it.
Yeah.
The thought of eating it outside of time places?
Yeah, and outside the proper time and place, passes to cover.
The thinking about it?
Yeah. But I just said that. No, it has to be you eating it Pesach. You can't eat it after Pesach. You can't think about it. Right?
No. Every korban has a certain time that you have to finish eating the korban.
I got it. But let's say korban Pesach, for example.
Yeah, in korban Pesach, if you intend to eat it not in the right time and place, then
yeah, that's what okay, fine.
Eating it in the right time?
Yeah.
Even if you do right, it's the question.
This is even if you're bringing it in the right, even if you're standing in the base of Mikdash, even if you're there.
You can't eat it, of course.
The bottom line, it's all bound by time and space, space and time. In contrast, the Teira in tachas azman. Teira is not bound by time. That's not just a technicality. It's just not bound by time. Anyone, the Gemara says, anyone who studies the laws of Eila, the Korban Eila, is considered as if he brought it. So here Simam is the opposite. Bringing a Korban Eila has its all the conditions. Learning about it, you don't even have to be in time of the Beis HaMikdash. You can learn about it any time, any space, anywhere you are. It's as if you brought it. It's even a bigger proof because it's telling you taking the same mitzvah that's bound in time and learning. That's why it says Yasik B'zeh is taka different than doing it because you're not going l'mayla mizman. Very interesting. So this is a good example of. I'll show you why this example in a moment. I'll tell you why this example is. It's not just an example. The whole Ayin Beis, he keeps going back to Teira mitzvahs. Teira is, if you remember, is Rotz and Keser Teira, and mitzvahs is. One second. No, the other way around. No, I'm sorry. My mistake. Teira is Pnimi and mitzvahs is Makiv. So maybe it doesn't fit. 1 second. Okay, let's finish this. V'chein halei Hilchos Pesach b'Sukkos. Good example. Like you're learning Hilchos Pesach b'Sukkos. There's nothing wrong with that. It's Ki'ilu Imekayim Pesach and Sukkos. Get the muscle. I don't know why would someone learn Pesach and Sukkos. Now, but I'll tell you why you would. Because there's a big question in Poskim. Why is Sukkos? Sukkos is a mitzvah that came out of Pesach. Yeah. So it should have been the time of Pesach. There's a reason it was pushed off. So that maybe that's his being Miran. Because you would want to learn about Pesach and Sukkos. You want to know what Sukkos is. You need to know about Pesach.
He's talking about reading the Rambam.
But we don't say that if you learn the Hilchos Pesach in a sukkah that it's ki'ilu that you've brought your the Haggadah. You'll say you're learning the Haggadah.
No, it's not a mitzvah. No, not.
There's no halacha that says it's like you're getting the schus of the schar.
First of all, it's not correct what you're saying. If you're learning Hilchos Pesach, it's ki'ilu hikruv Pesach. But it's not the mitzvah. Mitzvah is Pesach. We understand. He's not saying it's the mitzvah. He's just saying you have the ki'ilu hikruv. There's something about it that you do have.
So if I learn the mitzvah of tzedakah, it's like
it doesn't replace doing tzedakah. That doesn't say you should replace doing tzedakah.
That's what he's asking. That's how you started off with.
No. He didn't say replacing it. He's speaking about why Torah would take precedence. You're learning Hilchos tzedakah has an element, but it's not the chiyuv of the mitzvah. You're not being mekayim the mitzvah.
And if you're saying,
but it didn't say here Torah replaces mitzvahs. He says there's a quality of Torah that mitzvahs doesn't have. Right, that's higher than Zman. It doesn't say that, but you still have mitzvahs to do. Right. 1 second. He's not saying because you learn Torah Sa'ela, that's why you shouldn't bring a Korban Eila when there's a Beis HaMikdash.
Right.
You'll learn.
It's considered like we're doing the mitzvah or the Pusei Korbanos right now, right?
Yeah.
We are doing the mitzvah.
Yeah.
We are. It's like.
But if you were saying that there was a Beis HaMikdash now, you didn't bring the korban and you only learned, it would not be good enough.
Yeah. Right. You have to at least either make a shliach or do it yourself.
You know, there's a person said on Sunday they learn Hilchos Shabbos, right. And then that Shabbos they're not going to be Machal Shabbos. Is that what you're trying to suggest? It's ridiculous. I don't see the. It's a Dover Poshet. He didn't say it's a Dover Poshet. There's a Taryag mitzvah. There's a mitzvah to give tzedakah.
Then you're not learning. If you don't do it, you didn't learn it.
Only thing is, davar be'itei matev is a pasuk in Mishlei. That's matev. Best is to do things in their time. That's already so that's why we learn Hilchos Pesach before Shloshim Yom Kedem Achag, because you're learning it because it's coming up. But in Inyan, Torah is al makom yeshno lahamshacha. Nevertheless, from Torah there is the hamshacha is possible any time of the year.
I mean, you're not getting the mitzvah for it.
I understand what the problem is. There's a mitzvah to give tzedakah. You understand this?
Sure.
So what? So what are you saying? So,
no, I'm saying.
So because you learn Torah, the mitzvah is gone.
It's two separate things.
What two separate issues?
Yeah. One, we say that if you say a korban, because we can't bring a korban now, but gosh,
let's talk tzedakah. I don't want to use korban. Tzedakah. Let's talk about tzedakah.
How about the Haggadah? You learn.
Why not tzedakah? Why not tzedakah?
Okay,
because it doesn't work in your thing. It doesn't work. Yeah, and you know you're learning about tzedakah. You're learning about tzedakah. You get a certain hamshacha of tzedakah. Yeah, but you're not. But you are not mekayim the mitzvah.
Right. Okay.
That he didn't say here mekayim the mitzvah.
But earlier he said about the korban, you do get the mitzvah.
It's different.
It's ki'ilu.
You didn't have mitzvahs.
Ki'ilu.
Okay, ki'ilu.
You're getting them shachas. If the carbon was
not as good.
Because we can't do it physically. That's why.
Good question.
But it has an effect.
Are you getting the mitzvah when you say korbanos like you brought a korban? Yes or no?
Yeah, today yes, because we cannot physically bring the carbon.
Okay. And if you learn tzedakah,
but you could give tzedakah.
If you have a place,
there's no such thing. There's not everywhere you can give
have a
tzedakah.
dime to your name, but you're learning Hilchos.
You still have there's a din and there's chonark on that. You still.
was in the cave for 13 years. He couldn't be mekayim Torah mitzvahs. He couldn't be mekayim mitzvahs. So he replaced it through Torah because he physically couldn't be.
But that's because
mitzvah tzedakah when he learned it.
Yeah, he was being mamshich dam shachas. But he.
Elias, is this relevant to Ayin Beis or to your own curiosity?
No, here I'm trying to.
No. He's talking about time. No, you're missing the whole point here. He's trying to say that Torah is not bound by time and mitzvahs are. Your question does that your question contradicts that?
Mitzvahs are.
Are you suggesting that the mitzvahs are not bound by time and Torah is bound by time? Is that what you're trying to say?
No, he was trying to say the mile of Torah is that you can go.
That it's not a bound by time, exactly. You can learn it any time, anywhere, and get ki'ilu as it is. Yeah. What he's not saying here that means that you shouldn't do the mitzvah. What does one thing have to do with the next?
It's for the learn.
Why don't you ask a better question? In heaven, they can't do mitzvahs altogether. So what? They only learn about it.
It'd be like the Meraglim, just thinking into it, and it's done.
Okay, let's see what he says.
V'hainu, and this is lefishat Torah. He b'chinas chachma gedum da'ak shalamaylam b'chinas hazman. This is because Torah is the level of chachma geduma, the primordial wisdom of Adam Kadmon, that's higher than the level of time. Al kein gam ha-Torah hi lamaylam hazman. Because since Torah, in other words, is coming from that level of chachma that sees the whole thing that's above time and space, it's a beautiful explanation. It's the blueprint. Torah is the blueprint. A blueprint is above time and space. A mitzvah is not a blueprint. A mitzvah is part of the structure. So someone say, I'm going to look at the blueprint, and you're not going to get a building built that way. A building, you need bricks and mortar, in the physical sense of it. Yeah. Mashen kein mitzvahs. They're a level of revelation that come into the detailed revelation. They're already as a manifesting in time. You got this all? So it's very clear. Torah is the blueprint level. We have the gift. God gave us the blueprint. So when you learn the blueprint, it's as if you brought the korban. But then there's a mitzvah that's in time. The mitzvah is to go in that moment and do a dafka then. Remember, there's a mile of a mitzvah, there's a mile of a mitzvah over Torah also. The mile of the mitzvah of Torah is that you're actually being mevader that moment. Like I spoke the other day about, that you can't bring a korban the next day for that day, that's over with. Because you need to refine, you want time to be elevated. But Torah has this quality. And even though in Torah there's also klal and prat, as we shall explain, so they won't clearly also have klal and prat. So they just said the Torah is like the klal. He didn't go into detail what means klal and prat in Torah. In other words, in Torah you also have a general statement and you have details. But nevertheless, it's all the level of ak. And that's why the Torah speaks in the third person, the Because it's like the level of Ak. When it says Veidaber, and God spoke to Moshe, even Moshe is saying that. Why? Because Moshe is speaking, he's looking into Ak. And Ak is saying that. It's not a personal thing about Moshe. He's looking into the blueprint and saying, and God said to Moshe Rabbeinu. That's the Torah. Aval Mishnah Torah is Moshe Mipi Atzmei Amre. Moshe said on his own. The Mishnah Torah is Galus. Mishnah Torah is no longer an Ak. Mishnah Torah is already how he's learning it as an individual who's reviewing the Torah. He's not looking into the snapshot, into the blueprint and reading what it says there. Because all the things, the subjects that are spoken about in the first 4 books are said and repeated in Mishnah Torah. I always wondered why they say that, because Bereshis doesn't seem to be repeated in Mishnah Torah at all. It says that Mishnah Torah repeats Al Dalet Sfarim. It's Gimel Sfarim, really. Because Moshe starts from Yetzias Mitzrayim. But it does say everywhere Dalet Sfarim. I always wonder why. The only thing I thought was maybe by Hazino Shamayim, he's referring a bit to the things in Bereshis Bara. But it doesn't really talk about the Ovis at all in Mishnah Torah. Maybe alludes to, but so why do we say Mishnah Al Dalet Sfarim? I'm just asking.
It doesn't talk about all.
Yeah, but not like, it's really a review from Yetzias Mitzrayim.
I think it says also.
No, but really it's a review from Yetzias Mitzrayim to Boim Shana to. Okay, anyway, so that repeats. Well, Liesh is Abchinis Galus, being that now Mishnah Torah it's a reveal, because now Moshe is speaking about it in his time. You see, the first 4 books are talking the concept of Torah. What's Mishnah Torah? Mishnah Torah suddenly brings it back to a very specific moment. One, the 37 days of Moshe's last days of his life. And Moshe is reviewing the whole Chumash. Everything. He's reviewing it, in other words, on his terms. What just happened to us. So he says, so this is Galus, Aval Mishnah Torah, being that this is now revealed, it's not just the way it's in the blueprint. That's why Moshe says it from his own Piatzme. It's not what he's hearing from the Hashem, so to speak. Just the beginning of it, in the beginning he says, these are the words. It's only the beginning of the Pasha. Ascholos HaTeira probably means Ascholos HaSefer.
Yeah.
So it's only the beginning of the Torah, in other words, the beginning of this last book. It says these are the words. In other words, Moshe is still not speaking. Ela Dvarim Shedibra Moshe is still part of Pishlishi. Yeah. Right. So. Mipi Shlishi Amadaber. It's still Mipi Shlishi. It's still in that same language like till now.
In the question he says, Ascholos Mishnah Torah.
Yeah.
So Ascholos HaTeira means Ascholos Mishnah Torah. Yeah. That's in the beginning of the Maimer?
Yeah, in the beginning of the Maimer says Ascholos Mishnah.
When he asks the questions.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's continue. Shlishi Amadaber. This is like in the 10 Commandments. The Iksiv, it says, that God spoke all these words. So Ela Dvarim is comparing Veidaber. When you say Veidaber, it's Kol HaDvarim Eila. What means Kol HaDvarim Eila? So it's the Farshim Tai doesn't just mean the 10 Commandments. It means the whole Torah, because the whole Torah is encompassed in the 10 Commandments. V'zeu Kol HaDvarim. V'zeu Kol HaDvarim Eila. And that's the meaning Kol HaDvarim Eila also.
No, you missed that line.
I'm sorry. The Hainu, the Kol Mashanifrat. Which means everything that is broken down in detail in the written Torah and in the oral Torah, everything is encompassed in the 10 Commandments. That's the meaning Kol HaDvarim Eila in the Aseres HaDibros. The same thing here, it says Eila HaDvarim. The Mishnah Torah, to indicate that everything in Mishnah Torah, even though it's a state of revelation, he's going further. So in other words, the 4th Shvarim is the Klal of Ak. Even the beginning of Mishnah Torah is also the Klal of Ak. El Advarim, they encompass everything, even that which Moshe afterwards reveals Mepi Atzmei.
Okay.
He's saying that Klaus Torah is.
Both times in some places that the Dvarim is also a mamutza between the
Yeah. That's like what he's saying here. So we have maybe that's Pnimius Ak. So it's like we have here Ak in the first Dvarim. We have that's like maybe Pnimius Ak, and then they have an Ak of Dvarim, and then the Pratim of Dvarim.
where he goes into.
That's pretty cool. Yeah. Man. Yeah. That's why also the beginning of Dvarim is also because it's the level of the klal, the all-encompassing primordial thought of Ak. We can also say we could also say because Torah, even the details are also atzmim. They're not, in other words, they're not just mere details. They're core principles. How does that say? So what are you saying with that? In other words, he's saying Ela Advarim Ashiv Ramesha. Oh, he does. Ela Advarim the Mishnah Torah Ima Yeshu B'chinas Gal Said Eitz Advarim Mamash B'chinas Haklal Da'ak.
It's like art. It's like art.
So even though it's a revelation and Taki is speaking now on his own, first person, still it's the same Dvarim Mamash. Ela Advarim. Those Ela Advarim is Bavarning that is there's the connection. Mamash the same of the klal of Ak, of Adam Kadna, which makes the interface even deeper. That the pratim that come are also mamash that. So number one is everything is encompassed in Ak, and Ela Dvarim that even the details. Okay, yeah, good. And that's why the beginning says also in the third person to indicate that is also. That's the level of the klal, the pratim at the level of the klal. And all of Mishnah Torah is said from the mouth of Moshe. He speaks I, Moshe, to indicate that this is a level of revelation. Now the revelation is aligned with and is like the etzem, which is Elad Dvarim. So in other words, basically Torah is aligned with Ak. We're not. That's the point. That's the sad side. This is Torah, as I say, Mishnah Torah. Aber mir sei nicht. Right? I remember when the Rebbe, a very good example for this, when Tafshin Mem, every year, Shabbos Bereshis, they would sell the mitzvahs. For the year, and they would do it in front of the Rebbe, so it would take a long time. Yeah, so different Gaboim. One Gabi, that year the Gabi was Pinson, Shia Pinson. So they would tell him to put on a shtreimel, he put on a shtreimel, and he would tell a story or a dvar Torah, then he would sell the mitzvahs. So he told a story that was just printed then in Migdalays by Munshine, stories that when the maps were first mapped out, so those are the times of the Alter Rebbe. So the maps were still estimates because they didn't have any aerial views. So it was based on navigators who would travel and they would map out it was pretty accurate.
Coastline.
Yeah, the coastlines, that's what they saw. So the first maps of America came to Russia then. They showed the Alter Rebbe a map of America. The Alter Rebbe is looking at America. So the Alter Rebbe pointed and said there's a mistake in the map. Because the Staka Baraisa, he looked at, that's a stimmt. So the Rebbe never reacted to the stories or the Torah. The Rebbe would sit and look in Chumash. I remember when they would sell the mitzvahs, the Rebbe was looking in Chumash. He was like always learning, oblivious. But here, not many people heard it because the Rebbe spoke, like he didn't look up. When he finished the story, the Rebbe said that the ikar is, and the main thing is that when you're in America, you shouldn't make a mistake. That was the Rebbe's words. And I remember I wrote in the Hanachah then. I remember, what's the Havana, what's the Rebbe mean? Because in other words, the Alter Rebbe was saying that on Pitera, he sees America stims, something was wrong. But when you're in America, when you're in the Prat, the ikar is that you shouldn't. I just got an answer to that what the Rebbe meant. In other words, the Alter Rebbe saw it from the klal. So the klal, he made sure there's no mistake. He said that's a mistake. They made a mistake. Alter Rebbe didn't. The Rebbe said the ikar is done in America is mishmachin kentas. In other words, we should also be aligned with the Torah way of looking at America. Just a thought. Tie the story differently? How would you?
absorbing it.
You heard the Rebbe say it.
I heard it. I was one of the few that heard it because the Rebbe, no one expected the Rebbe to speak, but I was pretty close, so I could see that. And the Rebbe said, I remember the Rebbe said that he was sitting like this in the chair in the Farbrengen, same place. The Rebbe was looking at the Chumash like this. He was looking at the Chumash. I was there, and Pinson finished. Then he was about to start selling the mitzvahs. And as soon as he finished, the Rebbe says, "The ikad is as in America zomishmach." I mean, not.
It was by davening?
No.
Farbrengen.
No, what they say is,
Shabbos Bereishis, they would sell the mitzvahs after the Maimer.
Okay.
After the Rashi Sikha. The Rebbe would ask questions on Rashi, on Zohar, or whatever, and then they would sell the mitzvahs.
Okay. But you were on the bottom. You could hear from the bottom?
What means the bottom? I was on ground level. What do you mean? It's like I was like.
You heard
The Rebbe was how high? What do you think the Rebbe's height?
I heard
I heard very well.
You stood on something?
No. The Rebbe's sitting there. I'm standing here. What's what?
There's a height. So there's a depth of the
You're talking about three, maybe 2 feet. You think that?
Okay.
What did he say? Didn't you?
I did write 14 years of Hanochah, so.
You better have heard it.
Are you on turn?
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah.
This is a fascinating part here.
Yeah. I never understood when the Rebbe said it. I remember, it always bothered me. What it means, I mean, Americans are mishmachim to us.
I think you should write
Now
that.
I just got the answer from here.
Make that up.
Cooked in Torah, the answer stimmt in Torah.
But so explain. I didn't get it.
Okay, we'll continue. I'm not looking
No one in
at
the world that knows that.
No, it's in the Hanochah. People say it says it there.
No, but now with your understanding of what's going on,
Most people don't know the story altogether, but
most people don't know the story and they don't know what.
so why give them a question they never will have?
No, but now you have the answer.
Then they may fall asleep between the question and the answer. Like this. It was better than the Vuchim. No, it's actually a good lesson in life of how to align yourself. The point is to align yourself. See, Moshe's Mishnah Torah was aligned.
Yes.
What about I told you, our seconds of our life, are they aligned with Ak or not?
They're more aligned with Ach.
That's nice. And these are the words. This is the meaning of these are the words that Moshe spoke. The fourth Sfarim was spoken from the third person. That's Ak. And the fifth book, Mishnah Torah, which means the repeat of Torah, was said from Moshe. Being that this is the Galus, the revelation, and the beginning of Mishnah Torah. Mishnah Torah Nemer Pimesha Liyesh Zeh B'chinas Galus. Being because this is the revelation. Yeah. V'ascholas Mishnah Torah Nemer Pishishim Medaber Lahedes. And the beginning is in third person. Lahedes calls that to indicate all this. Or you call Baklal Da'ak.
All the rest of Mishnah Torah.
Yeah. Everything Moshe said. In other words, you need to have. Basically, the beauty of this is that Moshe is doing what Ak is supposed to do. He brought shtalshlus that comes out of Ak should be aligned with Ak. That's the key. Like very similar to what we learned about Akudim. If you remember that Yaakov was the Reyat Sein of love, and he took Lev and Elyon and made Akudim and Akudim Vrudim aligned. And the way they are in the all-encompassing Ak, in that way, in that form, are they revealed from the Klal to the Prat.
That's why Desh is Muchin.
That's
why Desh is Muchin and Dvarim.
That's good. Very good. That's
why? Because of what?
That's good.
What would you just say, Moshe?
In not all places in the Torah do you learn something from two psukim that are near each other.
And
Dvarim you do.
So here now he gives the answer because exactly the way it's encompassed.
Because it's a line, but why not in the other Sfarim? You could say because it's just a klal.
It remains a klal.
It remains a klal. Here you need the pratim or besmichus. Yeah, you could say that. It's very fascinating piece. This is gavaldik.
Yeah,
so it gives you a picture of the Torah and a real.
But still, according to this, do we say now that the 4 books are from Ak,
And the last book, even though he's aligned himself, it's coming still from Moshe Rabbeinu, which is Chachma Detzilus. So is it coming out that actually, even though it's totally aligned, I understand?
Yeah. You're probably right. Yeah.
The way it's coming
The
down.
fifth book, Mishnah,
it's coming down.
You're like Chachma Detzilus. You could say that.
So therefore,
He doesn't say it specifically, but you could technically say that.
Interface between Perishwal and
right.
Perishwal.
Yeah.
So
Has
it
both
has
elements.
milas
Has
and
both elements.
milas.
You need both. You need the blueprint, and you need the building aligned with the blueprint.
Yeah, it has elements of the.
It does say in Chassidus in places that the reason Moshe spoke the fifth book is because it's already an interface to tailor to our terms. So to Moshe speaking is already showing us that we can now relate to it. It's not just coming.
From the Malama.
It's not just from above, right? Exactly. It's a beautiful imagery. Kitzur. However, now the Atzmas HaMaitzel, the core source emanator, Atik, the Ak, which is Atik of Ak, which we call Primis Ak, is Lamayla Meged's man, is above time, above the category of time. The Bekeser, who Mati V'lei Mati. In Keser, it's Mati V'lei Mati, as I said, those two potential states, those two beginnings of the movements. She'ein is Chalkus. There's no distinction there, but it's still two Mati V'lei Mati. And if you look at Samach Vav, he elaborates in detail about Mati V'lei Mati.
The apparent contradiction, he says it's divided into Mati.
No, because he means it's not Rotzi V'shuv. There he says, for example,
but it's still Mati
that in the Mati you have Lei Mati, and Lei Mati you have Mati. Rotzi V'shuv, when you're in a state of Rotzi, you're Rotzi, you're in a state of Shuv, you're Shuv. That's why I said it's like in the seed level. It's still.
But there's still his house.
There's still two elements.
Right.
Yeshlema dezeu ba'arich. You could say this is an arich, this Mati V'lei Mati. But Atik li yesha tokas atzmus. Atik, being that it's a so-called piece of atzmus, meaning it's completely on the terms of Ein Sof. Ein shayach gam Mati V'lei Mati. Not possible there, the level of Mati V'lei Mati. So in order for there to be the level of time, Netzel b'chinas Ak. Ak was imparted. Shekel hakol b'pratis u'b'skirachas. Ak was imparted, became this that encompasses everything in detail and in one scan or one glimpse or one snapshot, one image. And that's what it's called machshava, like you said, but machshava is the subtlest reality in our world. He brought from the Pardes. And machshava achas, because it's all one, because indicating that there's no mitzias there. When mitzias, then it's abundant. Gamloi b'agdara mufshetes. Also, not even Hagdara Mufshetes. He explains that Hagdara Mufshetes is like the faculties within the spirit. You want another example, by the way, of these subtle levels here. We have our faculties that are functioning, called Koiches Gluyim. We have Koiches Nalamim, the faculties before they're functioning in actuality, the potential, like they write, like your hand can write, but it's not writing yet. Your hand can throw a stone, but it's not throwing a stone yet. Your mind can conceive of an idea, but it didn't conceive it yet. That's Koiches Nalamim. Then you have Koiches Hiyulim or Koiches Atzmim or Koiches Aklulim B'nefesh. How those faculties are not even yet a step before the conscious, but they're just still in the soul, in the spirit. That's called what he called Hagdara Mufshetes. That's an abstract categorization. It's categorized, it's a koyach, but you can't call it anything. All it is part of the nefesh. Your spirit has the ability to do all these things. The nefesh neise koiches. That he called arich. That's like the yisod, the yisod harishan, the element that's just an archetype, but doesn't even have an eish ruach mayim ofer yet.
Unformed mass.
Unformed mass. Then you have the nefesh itself.
Unformed mass.
Hagdara Pesach Shabbos? No.
It's not. It's not even Hagdara.
I know, but how do you type this term?
Just explain it.
I know, explain it, but what's the actual little...
Means, Hagdara Mufshetes means abstract categorization. Where did he say it in specific detail? Oh, here, top here.
What about Hagdara Mufshetes?
A few places, yeah.
He's talking about exclusive.
No, I know, right. I remember, we spoke about it. Hagdara Mufshetes is the Koiches Kluyim. Yeah. The Koiches Kluyim are Hagdara Mufshetes. That would be like the Eish Mayim Ruach Ofer, but our archetypes that are not yet heat and properties, and then there's the Chem Poshet, which is like the Nefesh itself. That's like Atik. Yechidus, singularity, achas, machshava achas, negates any type of substance.
By Nefesh, he says the same thing. Nefesh achas, she'ein shum rishon.
Right, Nefesh achas. That's like Atik Pnimisa, right? The one that's higher than time. Arich is already the klal, which is already like Mugdarim of Shetes. And then come the Keiches. Im Kein Uzman v'lo Zman. And so then Ak is both time and beyond time. That Lashon said already also. Yes, Bein Zman v'lo Zman. B'zein Amamutza. And that is the union of this interface. V'zeu Elad Dvarim Shlisha Medaber. But this is the meaning, these are the words spoken in the third person. Mitzvah Tachas Hazman. Mitzvahs are under time, are governed by time. And Torah, even though there are details, it's above time. Okay, we shall stop here. We did the end of chapter 169, page 342 and 343.